Getting older does not automatically make a person formidable. Time itself is merely a passing measurement. What truly transforms an individual is what their mind manages to extract from that time. For a polymath, aging triggers a profound cognitive shift. Knowledge stops acting like a scattered collection of isolated facts and begins functioning as a dense, interconnected network. In your 20s, you might memorize a concept. Decades later, you might face an entirely novel situation and realize that the very idea you absorbed years ago is the exact key to understanding the present reality. This is the threshold where raw experience morphs into potent pattern recognition. A mature polymath has collected a vast reservoir of mistakes, failed assumptions, keen observations, unexpected triumphs, and countless subtle lessons. Rather than just carrying the memory of these events, they begin extracting the underlying architecture from them. They become exceptionally skilled at predicting what decisions are likely to produce, which pieces of information carry actual weight, and which impressive-sounding concepts are entirely hollow. Their intellect becomes quieter in its presentation, yet infinitely more precise in its application. This brings us to the concept of becoming dangerous. This is not about malice or causing harm. It is about becoming profoundly difficult to deceive, nearly impossible to overwhelm, and entirely resistant to being boxed into simplistic frameworks. This intellectual evolution is rarely loud or obvious. It unfolds quietly over decades of colliding ideas with reality. Let us explore the specific layers of this transformation, leading up to a final realization that most people miss entirely. The first major shift happens when they completely lose the desire to prove their intelligence. There is a distinct phase in intellectual development where proving you are smart actually diminishes your effectiveness. Younger intellectuals often fall into the trap of showcasing their mental library. They feel compelled to correct every minor error, explain every granular detail, and surface obscure facts just to demonstrate the depth of their thought. Intelligence becomes so entangled with their identity that they constantly need external validation. But as polymaths age, they uncover an uncomfortable truth. You do not need to empty your entire mind onto the table every time you speak. Consider a complex business problem. A younger thinker might immediately launch into a 20-minute presentation detailing every economic principle, psychological factor, historical example, and technological possibility. An experienced polymath, on the other hand, might simply ask 3 precise questions. Those 3 precise questions often isolate the core issue far faster than any lengthy explanation. The mature thinker realizes that information only holds value when it alters an outcome. Having the answer is entirely different from knowing when that answer is actually useful. They also stop correcting harmless mistakes. If an error has no meaningful consequence, they let it slide. Not out of ignorance, but because they have mastered the art of distinguishing between what demands attention and what does not. The less they try to force people to see their brilliance, the more undeniably apparent their intelligence becomes. The evolution is about needing far less applause for what you hold in your head. The second shift occurs when their past mistakes transform into a highly calibrated intelligence system. Experience is never just what happens to you, it is the architecture you build out of what happens to you. For an aging polymath, a mistake ceases to be an emotional wound and becomes highly actionable data. They do not just remember the failure, they dissect it. Imagine a scenario where someone trusted the wrong business partner and suffered a financial loss. A standard reaction might be to conclude that people are inherently untrustworthy. An older polymath asks much sharper questions. They ask if they trusted confidence more than evidence. They ask if they ignored early warnings because they wanted the deal to be good. The pain of the event is converted into a clinical case study. This applies equally to personal relationships. Rather than just harboring resentment over a betrayal, they study the behavioral patterns that preceded it. They might realize they ignored repeated inconsistencies out of affection, or that they confused verbal promises with actual behavior. As these observations compound over the years, missed opportunities teach them the anatomy of hesitation. Embarrassing choices map out the flaws of emotional judgment. Their history evolves into a private library of patterns. They do not become paranoid. They simply get vastly better at spotting familiar structures before those structures can deliver their familiar, painful consequences. A mistake that once cost them dearly in time, money, or trust serves to insulate them from ever paying that specific toll again. Their scars become vital reference points. The third evolution makes them incredibly difficult to manipulate because they learn to read the structural blueprints of human influence. Manipulation rarely announces itself. In younger years, it bypasses logic by wrapping itself in the guise of friendship, concern, or urgent honesty. It strikes the emotional centers first. Someone might say, "If you really cared about me, you would do this." On the surface, it sounds like an emotional plea. But the mature polymath looks underneath the words. They see that the person is not arguing the actual merits of the request. They are holding the listener's identity and feelings hostage to force an outcome. The experienced mind notices this structural shift instantly. They start observing the framing. Why is this sudden deadline being imposed? Who actually benefits from this exact phrasing? Why is guilt being deployed before a question is even answered? Consider a common workplace tactic where someone claims, "Everyone else has already agreed. You are the only person making this difficult." A younger employee might crumble under the artificial social pressure. The seasoned polymath simply asks, "What exactly did everyone agree to?" That single inquiry shatters the illusion. They learn to separate emotional bait from hard evidence. Most importantly, they realize they never have to respond immediately. They claim the power to pause, observe, and say they need to think about it. That slight delay is often enough to dismantle an entire manipulative strategy. They become untouchable, not through blind suspicion, but through a deep comprehension of how influence operates. The fourth reason their capability scales is the compounding nature of their knowledge. Information becomes exponential when one concept unlocks 10 others. This is the hidden multiplier of the aging polymath. Their mind does not just grow larger, it grows infinitely more entangled. Imagine studying how memory works. That is useful alone, but then you study attention, and you see how attention dictates memory. Then you explore emotion, learning that highly charged experiences are encoded differently. Finally, you dive into sleep science, realizing that rest physically processes those memories. These are no longer isolated trivia points. They form a cohesive network. When an experienced polymath encounters a new challenge, they never view it from a single vantage point. They might spot a psychological pattern driving an economic problem, or a historical loop playing out in a political decision. Learning actually accelerates as they age because a new concept has dozens of existing frameworks to anchor itself to. A teenager might memorize a fact and leave it alone in the dark. The older polymath takes that same fact and immediately wires it into 20 things they already deeply understand. The mind shifts from acting like a static warehouse to operating like a dynamic web, where one observation can alter the meaning of something learned decades prior. The fifth profound realization is that intelligence devoid of timing is functionally useless. Knowing what action to take is a sign of intelligence, but knowing exactly when to take it is the essence of judgment. A brilliant young mind can make disastrous choices not because their idea was flawed, but because their timing was entirely misaligned. Imagine spotting a massive business opportunity. You see the gap in the market and the weakness of the competitors. You rush forward, but if the market is not ready, or the team is lacking, or the funding is unstable, the brilliance of the idea cannot save it. A correct decision made at the wrong moment yields the exact same wreckage as a bad decision. Polymaths learn brutal patience. They monitor conditions. They evaluate whether the environment can actually sustain the action. This governs daily interactions as well. You might have the perfect, irrefutable argument, but delivering it while both of you are enraged guarantees failure. You might spot a critical flaw in a company project, but exposing it publicly before gathering the full context will only spawn defensive conflict. The mature thinker separates urgency from true importance. They understand that forcing a great idea into reality before the resources exist will only destroy potential that might have flourished later. They ask not just if a move is right, but if this is the right moment. The sixth layer of this growth is reaching total comfort with being misunderstood. When you are young, being misunderstood feels like a crisis. You argue longer, you source more examples, you rephrase your points, desperately trying to force the other person to adopt your vision. But experience reveals that people are not necessarily rejecting your logic. They are operating from a completely alien set of foundational assumptions. If you spend years developing a highly unconventional mental framework and you try to hand your conclusion to a friend, they will evaluate it using their own different framework. Every explanation you offer just breeds another disagreement. Eventually, the polymath accepts a liberating truth. You cannot magically transplant your entire background, your years of study, and your lived experiences into someone else's head during a brief conversation. They become incredibly selective about what actually warrants a defense. They do not turn every conversational disconnect into a battle for validation. This requires immense humility and inner security. They accept the possibility that they might be wrong, or that both parties simply perceive reality through incompatible lenses. By abandoning the exhausting crusade to make everyone understand them, they conserve massive amounts of energy to focus on understanding reality itself. The seventh transformation is the refinement of curiosity. Curiosity does not fade with wisdom. It becomes highly expensive. In their youth, a polymath's attention is indiscriminate. A random thought can trigger hours of research, and they might easily look up 3 hours later entirely absorbed in a subject they never intended to study. This wandering is beautiful and necessary early on, but time forces a new calculation. They realize that attention is a finite, depleting resource. Every rabbit hole explored is energy stolen from another pursuit. The core question shifts from asking if something is interesting to demanding to know if it is actually worth their attention. You might stumble across a fascinating theory about human behavior that could entertain your mind for months. But the older polymath weighs that against finding a question that could permanently alter how they navigate their career or their relationships. They learn to separate the information that merely stimulates the brain from the information that fundamentally upgrades its operating system. A neat fact might hold their focus for 10 minutes. A structural question might command their focus for 10 years. They grow comfortable leaving mysteries unsolved and arguments unresearched. This calculated restraint looks like diminished curiosity to an outsider, but it is actually surgical focus. They realize the greatest threat to a brilliant mind is becoming fascinated by absolutely everything while committing to absolutely nothing. The eighth advantage is the automatic calculation of second and third order consequences. Every choice casts a long shadow. Most people make a decision based entirely on the immediate visible result. A manager might decide to reduce staff to save money. The first-order consequence is thrilling. Expenses fall and the balance sheet looks pristine. But the experienced polymath is already looking at the invisible chain reaction. Because of the cuts, the remaining workers are instantly overloaded. Their motivation plummets. The most talented employees, who have options, begin leaving. The company must now spend exorbitant amounts recruiting and training replacements. Productivity collapses, and client satisfaction drops. The initial choice was not necessarily stupid, but stopping the analysis at the first result was fatal. Mature thinkers habitually stretch the timeline out. If they take an action, they ask what happens next, and then what condition that secondary event creates. If someone receives a hostile message, the first-order desire is to fire back an angry response for emotional relief. But the second-order consequence is a permanently fractured relationship and a lingering conflict. By seeing the chain before they step into it, their actions often appear unusually calm or deliberate. They willingly absorb a difficult situation today to block a catastrophic situation tomorrow. The ninth evolution is a total disregard for credentials in favor of raw competence. Early in life, titles, degrees, and awards carry immense weight. They signal that an institution vetted someone. But time exposes a jarring reality. Reputation and actual ability very often do not scale together. You will inevitably encounter individuals with flawless academic pedigrees who cannot explain a basic concept without hiding behind impenetrable jargon. Conversely, you will meet people with far fewer credentials who can rapidly dissect a complex crisis, isolate the variables, and chart a clear path out. The older polymath stops looking at the packaging and stares only at the behavior. If two people want a position and one has an impressive academic background filled with buzzwords about leadership, while the other has fewer credentials but can forensically explain how they solved a disaster, what they learned, and what they would change, the polymath knows exactly where the value lies. They look for the evidence of execution. Can you admit ignorance? Can you forecast consequences? Can you hold your nerve when the environment degrades? Credentials prove effort, but they do not prove clarity. The mature mind stops asking who is supposed to be impressive and starts asking what the person standing in front of them can actually do. The 10th and final weapon is the mastery of simplicity. Complexity is often used as a shield. A convoluted problem makes people feel intelligent just for engaging with it. But depth and complexity are not synonyms. True experience breeds the ability to hunt down the very few variables that actually dictate the outcome. Take personal finance. Someone might spend weeks absorbing complicated videos about investing, memorizing financial terms, and building intricate spreadsheets. But the mature polymath looks at the board and finds the controlling variable. They consistently spend more than they earn. No amount of sophisticated market strategy will outrun that simple mathematical flaw. Real-world problems are flooded with noise. A sprawling business might have thousands of customers, endless data streams, and complicated software. Yet a single neglected communication flaw might be generating 90% of the friction. The seasoned thinker aggressively asks what actually moves the needle. When they simplify, it is not because they cannot grasp the complex details, it is because they understand the system so intimately that they know exactly which pieces can be stripped away without losing the absolute truth. This is why the absolute best explanations often sound embarrassingly simple. A brilliant doctor explains a terrifying diagnosis without burying the patient in Latin. A master teacher makes physics intuitive without making it false. When you know a little, everything seems critical. When you truly understand, you realize most things are distractions. The ultimate intellectual victory is not adding another layer of complexity, but identifying exactly what can be permanently removed. In the end, wisdom is not about possessing an encyclopedia of answers. It is about knowing precisely which questions are worth trading your time for. Polymaths do not become formidable merely by hoarding data. The real power is forged when decades of broad study crash into decades of unyielding reality. They have watched absolute certainties crumble. They have seen cyclical patterns repeat. They have lived through the regret of poor timing. This leaves them with a radically upgraded sense of judgment. They prefer accuracy over the appearance of genius.
They are not more aggressive. They are simply impenetrable to deception. If this breakdown shifted your perspective on how intelligence ages, leave your thoughts below, share this with someone who values deep thinking, and make sure to subscribe for more insights into the mechanics of the mind. Keep observing and keep questioning.